Thank you for joining our Imagery International program. We hope you found it stimulating. ImageryInternational.org.
And evolutionary complexity. Hi, Heather. How are you?
Hi, Juliet. Thank you. I'm well. Thank you so much for having me on. It's so nice to get to speak about this subject matter.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. It is so. It is very intellectual, this approach, but I'm going to try to show that certain intellectual traditions within the complexity science, within evolutionary complexity, are powerful ways for clinicians, healers, people in the medical profession to begin to have, I guess I would call it ammunition, to understand deeper and, I guess, perpetuate the primary role of image in healing and transformation processes. But I've been thinking a lot about the findings coming out of the complexity sciences. This idea of nonlinearity, which, again, these terms I'll try to explain succinctly, but these form a kind of crossroads connecting various schools of thought. So when I say complexity science, I'm referring to a very exciting area of study that unifies living systems, how we imagine ourselves in relationship to the world, and how we imagine and know really how these living systems relate. So these theories of self-organized complex adaptive systems, another term is nonlinear dynamical systems theory, chaos theory, complexity theory. It goes by many names, but these intellectual traditions create new ways, or maybe actually I should probably say old ways, of envisioning the role of image, new ways of stating the old ways, I think is a good way to put it.
Okay, that's a good way to put it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So again, the idea of having ammunition to restate things, I think, is important. But the role of image in healing and transformation. So, I'd like to start, I think, just by briefly explaining what I mean by self-organization. But the most important thing is that this model, self-organization, and these findings are transdisciplinary, holistic, and oriented to the human being in its web of relations, and oriented to the connection to the body, as well as culture and nature. So the nice thing about self-organization theory is that it moves from all these levels, what they call the micro levels, the tiny little, micro processes going within the body and chemical processes, all the way up to large movements within culture and the planet, really. So I find that very exciting.
Talking about today. Yes, I'm sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
I didn't actually hear what you said.
I just said that what an important topic to be talking about with everything that's happening in the world right now.
Oh, yes. Yeah, and I kind of, it is, and I wanted to weave that in because it just somehow that this, the language of these traditions is so resonant with that. So, so self-organization is really the problem of how a system, any system, living system, biological system, weather system, human system, how it organizes, how it self-organizes. And the interesting issue is how it organizes with no locatable or directable center within the system, but rather somehow it understands it gets its organization from its relationships to other systems. So and I'm going to get a little intellectual here, but I won't stay there long. It brings, and this is just to create maybe pockets of exploration if someone hears these ideas and wants to explore further. But it brings us to the idea of what's called structure-function relationships among living systems. So there's the physical structure, and then there's kind of what it does. And this relationship is interesting because it brings us into a lot of problems that we deal with in healing. And the term, this form of thinking began with the early, what they call cybernetics, which they were interested in study of regulatory structures within systems. And that term draws on the Greek word for steersman, which means one who steers the ship. So, for a long time, I guess since the 30s and 40s, the cyberneticists were looking at these problems. And so the findings that I just find so exciting within, as I said, these complexity sciences are about these findings of unexpected complexity that we didn't imagine within, say, the genome, for instance, and within complex adaptive systems like us. We are complex adaptive systems. We evolve along with our environment, which is evolving and adapting along with us. So it's this very co-determining, interconnected, co-evolving idea that I'm just trying to set up generally right now. But these findings support an evolutionary approach, evolutionarily complex approach to understanding the complex role of how psyche or mind or body relates to biology, culture, and nature. And so very quickly, I think, from here, you can see that the problems that begin to be addressed, basically the central role of the gene, what is the role of genetics, or what might be called genetic determinism, or maybe within evolutionary theory, what is the role of the evolution of language, what's the role of music, and within neuroscience, how do these findings begin to paint a picture of life from a deeply affective and holistic, organismic point of view? So that was all very large ideas that I threw out there. But just to move quickly, the role of image within all of these problems or ideas, I guess, although they are problems because there's so much discussion about them. There's not a lot of agreement. But I think the role of image becomes even more important because as we shift from theories of evolution, dominant theory of evolution, to include findings coming from, as I said, these areas of scientific study, we see a progression in a very natural and evolutionary role from affect, from emotion, to image, and then from image to symbol or symbolic experiences, and then to healing and transformation. And so I'm so interested in how all of this connects up and how we can empower the position of image and healing by using these findings. Very powerful place for us to be thinking.
Yes, thank you for explaining that, Heather, and kind of setting the foundation for some of the terms you're using, because most of the people who are listening are healers. You know, they're in the nursing profession, a lot of them, and they understand this connection very deeply. You know, some work in hospice, some work with how our images can serve to help us destroy ourselves in terms of how we're even coping with the things that go on in life, and how the images and symbols and meanings can then serve also in our healing, even if that healing is in the process of dying. But understanding the systems, I mean, certainly in psychology, we do look at someone's family system, we look at their socioeconomic situation, we look at their culture and ethnicity and their religious affiliations and spiritual approach to life, how they are in their body, family systems. There are many different theories and approaches to working within a family, and how if one person is acting out, the whole system is affected. Therefore, if one person is seeking healing, being that identified patient, if you will, the whole system then has to change. But then taking it further and deeper into an evolutionary complexity from the complexity sciences, we really see that this isn't just a theory that some person came up with as a pretty effective way to work with families, but it's deeply embedded in our structure and our function as human beings, and not only human beings, but as our planet and as the ecosystem functions as well. So thank you for talking about this. I think it's really important. And you've worked a lot with adolescents and families also. And so
yes,
I think that, you know, the time of adolescence is such a growth. It's a time of so many different systems coming together as that person is building identity and going through hormonal changes and trying to find a way in the world and trying to be part of a family and yet separate from a family. So I'm sure that people listening would be interested to hear about how in psychotherapy, for instance, this is coming into play and what you've experienced.
Yes. Well, I mean, one of the most powerful things, I think many people will resonate with this no matter what their profession. I know, as you said, our listeners are across a broad range of disciplines, but that the image is a relational process, that image production is surprisingly relational. There is a lot of discussion about how it's generated on its own accord, and that's a sort of a truth, I believe, as well. But I'm interested in how images bridge connection between mind and body, inner, outer. And in thinking about adolescence, it's an interesting idea, as you said, to imagine them coming into being and grappling with movement out into the world, away from the family, identity, and that their identity kind of emerges within these interactionist kind of contexts of all these overlapping influences, the changes going on in their body, their peers, romantic relationships, and, of course, family as well. And then their deep engagement with culture. And I feel like adolescence is a time of this kind of deep relational engagement where the body's changes it becomes so important that we take up all of these different parts of these, as I said, interaction as context, just to think about healing and working with them, because they are all equally important. So,
so if parents, come to you and are saying, I just don't know what to do about my son or daughter. They're obstinate, they're acting out, they're ignoring me, they're constantly on the internet. I feel completely shut off. They were such a adorable and well-behaved, interested, curious child, and now our relationship is changing. They're terrible. What do I do about them? What might you say to the parents?
Right. Well, I would empathize with them and say, oh yes, it's as if someone came in the night and replaced your child with someone else. But I would say that drawing on some of the findings within evolutionary theory, I would say that these behaviors are natural and even good and ubiquitous. That they happen across all cultures. The separating now how they manifest is more particular to individual difference and cultural groups. I'm going to get my kitty. She really wants to be involved in this discussion.
So well, bring her in. We love animals around.
When I talk about complexity, she just really has to chime in.
She's tuned in. Okay. Coming
in the door. That's funny. But so in terms of adolescence, these behaviors that are often conceived of as neurobehavioral, because they're rooted in deep biological process. However, they emerge at that relational interface between all of these contexts, like you said, the family system and finding identity and moving out into the world. And the thing is, I believe that it's such an exciting time to work with adolescents and to even be an adolescent or be around an adolescent, because they have, in the language of complexity theory, they have these sensitive thresholds, which means that as they are becoming increasingly complex and in an increasingly complex culture, on the internet and plugged into their phones and all of the media, that it creates opportunities really for these sensitive thresholds where a sort of information can have profound effects and profound outcome. And I think, just to tie it in, and I hope it's clear here, but to tie it into the evolutionary role of image and of the power of that as an ancient embodied process, the adolescent is sort of showing us in a way that that process in a very it's almost like we can see how quickly they're changing in all of their relationships and the power of symbolic experience. I think that's another important thing. They're learning to have symbolic experiences for the first time. So I would say to parents that try to endure, but feel that it's very positive, all these changes, and natural.
Especially if the symbolic world is honored and incorporated into the relationship and into the inquiry about what symbols have meaning to you, for instance, as you might ask the adolescents you're working with or the family, and really bringing those images and symbols alive. Because in our culture, we have lots of images. We're an image-driven culture, as any culture is. But I mean, certainly with our addiction to media and the influences of the media without questioning. And so to question our current storytelling mechanisms and how we buy into things without even questioning them brings us to a deeper way of understanding ourselves and the images that drive us and the images that drive us also into addictive behaviors and out of them. And so, incorporating the work of imagery for the goal of any kind of healing is a sense of coherency within the self system, right? And affect, emotional regulation, body regulation. So people listening who work in all the different ways, some with body work, some who are so aware of how we even hold when we're shut off from the image, when we're shut off from our meaning-making systems, and how we hold that in our musculature, in our body, in our organs, and such. And so it's an important topic. I'd love for you to, and I hate to put you on the spot, but if you want to take us through just a few minutes of even an imagery, we like to do this with each other, all of us.
Okay.
People who honor imagery is just bring people into maybe a hands-on experience, and any opportunity for us to engage in something experiential, we jump for. So if you want to take us through a brief imagery practice, as long as someone's not driving a car right now, maybe
I would
do so for a moment, Heather, if you're willing.
I would. Yes, and I'm going to hold in mind a little bit as I do this, just based on some things you just said, the idea of the adolescent and the relationship to image as I do this. I think it's a nice shape I'm going to hold in mind to this spontaneous exercise. So the idea of being curious about the images that hold us or compel us, or the ones that keep showing themselves to us, or the ones that we think come from inside us. So I'm just going to begin then and see. And this is actually something that I've sort of done with a few of my adolescent patients. So, okay. So find yourself in a landscape. Just take a few minutes or seconds to start to let an image of a landscape of place appear to you. And when you have an image of this place, it might be the forest or the beach, it may be your home or a place you've always wanted to call home. When you begin to get a little bit of that shape, now allow yourself to imagine moving into that landscape. Or we might call it an oceanscape or a homescape. And now, as you can imagine yourself within it, start to pay attention to how it feels in your own body. Where are your feet? How are your feet connected to the surface under them? Are they on the ground? Are you reclining? And notice how you are in relationship to this maybe still forming landscape. Are you deep in it already? Or are you kind of at the threshold still and waiting to be invited in? And so just give yourself a few moments to feel yourself in this environment and focus on the connection of your body placement. How does it feel? How are you touching the land or the furniture? And what does it feel like? Maybe as you've felt that connection there, now allow your imagination to either create or take in more of the landscape. What is going on around you? What's high above you? How does it feel on your skin? What are the sounds that you're hearing? How do your eyes take in the information? What's the light like? Is it soft? Is it bright? And now imagine that you have found a place where you secretly belong, and that this place is yours, has always been yours, and has somehow secretly devised a way for you to be here again. It's actually perfect for you. Imagine that's true. And now see what comes to you as you hold this idea in your mind. What images present themselves? Is the landscape shifting? Are you shifting? And now, as you have found this place, which is home, and where you belong, feel your feet on the surface of what's below you, whatever that is, soft, peaty dirt, sand, water. Feel the sensation and let that feeling travel, that sensation travel up your legs, into your knees. Perhaps it's warm. Perhaps it's cool. Is it energizing? Let it, imagine this sensation and even an energy coming from this place, coming up through, let it travel all the way up through your stomach, through your heart, and let it rest in your heart, and imagine a warm feeling around your heart, and see if you can even picture that warm heart feeling going out beyond you, maybe back into your feet or back into the ground, or maybe out to an image that's on the landscape somewhere. And what happens then to the image? And so now there's almost a connection of light or energy or thought connecting you to your feet on the ground and something out in the world that may be beginning to take on a new identity or a meaning or some feeling for you. And yet there's also a connection back to your heart. So you're in this kind of holding place where everything is looping. And now imagine that it's circulating. It's not still. Imagine a glowing blue, fiery kind of circulation between all those elements. Your image, the landscape, connection to the earth, and your heart. Just see if you can stay with that circulation and just notice it. And now we'll just come back down into our feet. And feel your feet on that surface. And step gently out of your landscape. And come back into this landscape.
Thank you. Thank you, Heather. And those who are listening, you can maybe jot down or draw a couple of things that might come up from this and make a promise to yourself to revisit this place. Thank you so much, Heather. That was beautiful.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I have a special place that I go to, and but this time I went somewhere else, and I went in California where we live. There are some areas that have rolling hills, with oak trees, and certain times of the year, it's very green. And there's a place up beyond Cambria, going into the wine country, and it's a long, kind of windy road. And at a certain point, you can see the ocean, and I felt the dewy grass. It was really, really nice. Great.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. And I could see a lot of the suggestions in there that you were using, and I could see how with adolescence, that what you're building is containment also, and acceptance. Yeah, and yes. Knowing that, I liked how you included a secret place for them that's theirs, because it's private and it's part of their individuation process too.
Right.
They have their own unique experience.
Right. And the idea that this, whatever this place is or might be, that it might not be where you think it is or what you think it is, but it might be hidden, this idea of home or belonging. It might be there, but to be curious about it and open to it is because it's very hard being an adolescent.
Yes, building that structure that home is right here within yourself. Yeah.
And yet that I think it's co-created. That there are ways to utilize world, because I think adolescents are more oriented towards world than ever before, and perhaps ever again. So
very good point. Very good point.
Yeah. So,
well, our time is starting to close up here.
Yes.
Is there anything that you'd like to kind of leave us with, Heather, and all our Imagery International folks around the world who are tuning into this and listening? Sometimes I like to ask people if there's a closing thought or quote or some kind of statement to leave us with.
Well, these ideas that I touched on about co-evolution, how do we unify our complexity, maybe the adolescent's developing complexity? How do we unify that in a resonant way that creates sustainable development in the world? while not curtailing diversity, right, but maintaining its development on the different levels. That's what's so exciting about complexity. I just read it's the unity of plural and diverse elements. So how do we cultivate a sense of responsibility for each state, each level, each individual, for the unity, the whole, or the plural world? That's the big question.
Oh, that's a big question. And we're kind of an adolescent world right now, aren't we?
Yeah.
In our own development. So very, very important.
I think so. I think as a country we're adolescent, perhaps. So I didn't leave you with an idea of a question.
That's okay. So, questions are good. They open up more thought, more feelings. So, well, thank you. Maybe you'll come back again and do another podcast sometime.
Well, I'd like to.
We look forward to hearing more from you. And okay, so everyone who's listening, thank you as well, and wishing you all the best. Bye.
Thank you for joining this Imagery International podcast. The music in this piece is provided by Shantha Shri. Find out more about our membership benefits, including our quarterly journal, at imageryinternational.org. Thank you for listening.